Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Izuku becomes the Spider-Man and got harem with Kyoka Jiro and Mina, part 2. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, Slayer76, link is in the description. Also subscribe to our channel and like this video. So let's begin the video. Man, the support department sure knows what they're doing, Echako says while patting her new tech. She had wanted a way to control her movements once she started using zero gravity on herself. Power Loader suggested a pair of wrist thrusters that would allow her to change directions in midair. I'm just surprised that they finished all this in a couple hours. Denki remarks. He ended up receiving contains a dial that allows Denki to choose the pointer he wants his electricity to be directed towards in case multiple of the pointers are set up. There's also a black and yellow piece of plastic that sits on his right ear. If he pushes the button on the center, it will display a holographic image that shows the 0 and 100 pointer robots in 10 minutes as an entrance exam. Power Loader smirks. This shocks Class 1A, except for Shadow and Momo. The recommended students had never seen the 0 and 100 pointers. So, you guys are the reason I almost stepped on Echako huffs. That was her least favorite near-death experience, and that's saying a lot when you remember the time where she almost floated into a spinning helicopter blade as a kid. A step forward if the sensors registered the presence of an applicant within stepping distance. The most that would happen is a raised foot hanging over you. You weren't in any real danger, Power Loader comments. This also gains the ire of Izuku. I broke my body for no reason. He thinks as his right eye starts to twitch. If he had known that the robot would stay in one place and hover over her, he would have spent some time on lowering the power of his punch to a setting that's less than turn your bones into powder. Aizawa walks, stumbles into the support department and Power Loader shoots him a look of pity. He knows that feeling all too well, at least half his day is spent writing letters of recommendations, signing for more materials and chemicals, and filling out a bunch of forms that are just going to end up sitting on some corporate bigwig's desk for God knows how long. Then get skimmed over before being accepted. Paperwork sucks, and Aizawa groans before letting out a 10 seconds long yawn. He had finally filled out the forms required in order to make the appointment of Izuku and Momo as Class 1 reps official when a gust of wind blew them out of the window, Aizawa ripping the forms up with their beaks and talons. His hatred for birds ignited because this meant that Aizawa had to start over and waste another half hour. At this point, he's in a really bad mood and is in need of some serious stress relief. Mr. Aizawa is almost excited to punch him and head to the bus out front. We're taking a field trip. Aizawa yawns again. Izuku malfunctioned that caused the eyes of his mask to start moving on their own. Oh yeah, Izuku has to wear his gym uniform due to his costume being blown apart in a way where being used as a baby blanket is the only viable use for it. Aizawa announces. Fine. Izuku grumbles. He hates how restrictive the gym uniforms are, twisting in midair is going to be such a hassle. Vanetta would make it back to class just in time to avoid being left behind. BSJ. Izuku was definitely living the dream. So was Echako, judging by how she was hopping from foot to foot with a smile on her face. In front of them was the space hero. 13, and they were standing in the USJ. I'm sure you are all aware of my quirk. Black Hole 13 said. Of course they did, 13 is the 5th ranked rescue hero. Yes, it has saved many lives in rescue situations. Iida exclaimed. Indeed it has, but my quirk is one that can kill quite easily. Some of you have quirks like that, don't you? Izuku's jaw clenched. In this world of regulated quirks it might not seem that way, but the fact is, some people have quirks that can easily kill if they lose control for a single instant. With Aizawa's test, you learned the limits of your quirk and how to adapt to them. With All Might's combat training, you learned what it's like to use your quirk against others and the danger that brings. With me, I hope that you learn your quirks are there to save lives, not to harm others with. Bakugo flinches. That is why you are at UA, to learn how to help people and become the best heroes you can be. Thank you for listening. It was a good speech and everyone cheered for it. For Izuku, he found that he wasn't the only one who struggled with his quirk. All those years of wallowing in self-pity as his strength broke everything he touched, resigning himself to a lonely future. All the while, 13 was dealing with a much more destructive power and turning it into the greatest tool for saving people from disasters. Alright, now that the speech is done, let's head over to Aizawa gets cut off as he hears the sound of footsteps behind him. He jerks his head backward as last week. 13, get the students out of here and go call for backup. Aizawa barks before pulling his goggles over his eyes. Time for some stress relief. You can't take all of them on your own, your fighting style is more suited for one-on-one fights and capturing outs before leaping down the stairs to engage the villains. Class 1 rushes to the door, but their retreat is intercepted by that black mist from before. Now that it's closer they can see that the mist has yellow eyes. Sorry, kids, I'm afraid I can't let you do that. It says allow us to introduce ourselves, we are the League of Villains. Our information says that All Might is supposed to be with you, but he doesn't appear to be here yet. I guess we'll have to pass the time by killing you until he shows up. That it right, Kurogiri, we agreed to call it the V Club. A man with light blue hair and a hand attached to his face yells from the back of the villain horde. I refuse to call it that, anyways, time for you too. Kurogiri gets cut off by 13, activating black hole to pull him in. 13, wait. Izuku shouts as his spider sense activates. We were going to leave you alone, but you forced my hand, Kurogiri states before opening 2 portals with his mist. One in front of 13 and another behind. The back of 13's suit gets sucked into the redirected black hole, along with a couple layers of skin. 13 deactivated the quirk before any more damage can be done and collapses to the ground. Now that 13 is out of the way, we can play. Kurogiri laughs. Izuku's spider senses start tingling and he grabs hold of Kyoka and Momo because they were the closest before yelling move. Say hi to the others for me, he says before sending a wave of mist at the students. The mist covers the distance quickly, the only people who can evade it by themselves are Iida and Izuku. Recipro boost. The engines in Iida's legs activate and he speeds over to Ichako, Rikudo, Sugar Guy, Mina, Siro, Tape Boy, and Mizo, hentai waiting to happen. He drags each of them away from the mist. Izuku pulls the girl's clothes before jumping into the air away from the mist. You won't get away, Izuku Midoriya, Kurogiri declares before making the rest of the mist converge on them. He knows my name, Izuku thinks, as he lands next to Iida. Keep them safe or else. Izuku commands before jumping backwards and dodging the mist that was about to ensnare him. He rolls before pushing himself up diagonally, states, as the black mist splits into 5 separate streams that fly around Izuku's ball form. Got to think quickly, Izuku thinks, as the mist starts closing around him. Don't do it, Salvation warns. There's no other choice. Izuku retorts. Getting warped doesn't sound too bad, Salvation suggests. We're doing this, Izuku says, as green lightning arcs across his right band's middle finger and red veins of power appear on it. Flick. The wall of air punches a hole through the black mist and caves in the ground underneath him. Izuku looks down at his middle finger and sees that backlash bent his finger backwards, the bone is starting to poke out and the skin has blackened. If Salvation wasn't there to numb the pain, Izuku would probably be on his knees screaming in the manliest way possible and crying, again, in the man. He's still miffed at that Onigiri remark. Really? Look down. He does. Shit. Black wisps of mist are leaving the cracked ground around him. The day, Sir Kurogiri says, as a column of mist envelopes Izuku. He hums before turning to look at Kyoka and Momo. You're next. 2 more columns of mist appear. Iida tries to grab Kyoka's arm, but he's too late. As soon as his hand wraps around her arm, she vanishes. So did his hand. Iida screams while clutching his handless right arm. Such the philosophy of every man for himself. Don't bother trying to make a phone call, Kurogiri turns to look at Ichako. She has a phone in her shaking hands. We're jamming the signal. Find a nurse. Mizo Shoji says we'll watch your back. I'll melt open the door for you. Mina shoots a stream of acid that quickly eats through whatever the door was made of. Iida is in no condition to be moving, much less running. His arm is pouring out blood. Ichako interjects while gesturing to Iida, who is currently on his knees and screaming into his other arm. Without his hand and wrist, the vein in his arm is allowed to dump blood into the earth. Nobody else is fast enough to get to the school in time, I have to do this. Ichako, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but we have to focus on the task at hand. Iida says, while struggling to get back on his feet. I'm being really nice to let you have this conversation. The only reason I'm not stepping in is because I'm curious to see if he passes out from blood loss now or on the way to UA's main building, Kurogiri states. Tomura works better with a time limit anyways. Izuku's warp. We find Izuku plummeting to his doom. You just had to insult the guy, Salvation replies. Don't antagonize the guy who could warp you into a volcano. Salvation screams. Less yelling at me, more figuring out a way to avoid going splat. Puddle of it is rapidly approaching. I have an idea, but it may break your arm in the process, Salvation suggests. So, breaking a finger is a too big risk, but breaking my fucking arm is perfectly fine. Izuku questions. Yes, now punch the air with one for all. The wind should slow your fall. Salvation commands. If this kills me, I'm going to haunt you for the rest of your life. Izuku shouts before charging one for all into his right arm. He swings his arm forward at an angle, this results in the wind forming a tornado once it hits the ground. Izuku gets sucked closer to the tornado and starts spinning along with it. The force of the wind pushing him up is able to overpower the gravity pushing him down. This is just enough to start slowing his descent. In the end, it still doesn't stop him from crashing into the ground and bouncing like a ball. He comes to a rolling stop a few feet away from the landing zone. Broken arm for the win. My arm feels like I slammed a car door on it, Izuku groans before hearing the sound of numerous footsteps coming his way. The spider sense activates, and Izuku feels the need to hide. The sound of footsteps got closer, and one of the villain's bodies began casting a shadow over Izuku's supine form. There was somebody here, I swear I saw someone drop from the sky before that tornado came, said a villain. This villain is a vertical beast, much more normal. Why can't they see me? Izuku questions as the group of villains walk towards the mountain zone. The puddle of green and purple goo with eyes exits Izuku's chest and looks around. You're blending in with the ground, Salvation whispers. Why do I have so many different powers? Izuku groans before asking Salvation where the villains are going. Salvation looks into the distance and sees the same giant man heading towards a mountain. They are heading towards the mountains. Salvation answers. Izuku props himself up on one arm and becomes visible again. We're going after them, they're trying to hurt my friends. They have st. Yes, they'll regret making an enemy of us. But before we deal with that, your clothing is too restrictive for us to fight together effectively. Salvation agrees before wrapping around Izuku's body. Let's change that. The symbiote strips Izuku of everything except his underwear and web bombs, then begins to form a new costume composed entirely of itself. The suit is primarily green, with a purple spider stretching across his torso and back. The eyes of his mask are white with black outlines. Since when could you do this, and why are you still green and purple? Izuku asks. This would save so much money on clothes. Since last night, I tested it out when you were sleeping. To answer the second question, changing my color to things when Izuku is sleeping. For example, he surfs the web and watches an anime that Izuku isn't fond of watching, like a certain magical index. Okay, let's show them why you don't enter a spider's web. Izuku states. With Kyoka and Momo. Kyoka and Momo are set on the ground with their backs to the cliff's edge. They look up to see a bunch of men and women with bat wings, bird wings, dragon wings, etc. They look down and see Denki on a lower part of the mountain. A little help here. Denki shouts at them. He's currently being boxed in by a group of 6 similar-looking men. Looks like Shigaraki managed to recruit a family of villains. Just zap them. Momo yells. They have rubber transformation quirks. My electricity isn't being conducted. He replies while taking another step. She doesn't notice the extra weight on her arm until she looks down at it. Kyoka unleashes a shrill shriek that draws the attention of Momo. What's wrong, are you injured? Momo questions with concern in her voice. Iida's hand is still on me. She yells while waving her earphone jacks around. Momo gags after accidentally looking at the severed hand. Kyoka carefully pries Iida's severed hand from her arm and gingerly sets it on the ground. Help. Denki yells, his back up against the side of the mountain. He doesn't try to throw a punch because he knows he'll be dogpiled. Cover your ears. Kyoka commands before plugging her earphone jacks into her purple stereo cubes and tosses them into the air. She channels the sound of her heartbeat into them and unleashes a wave of debilitating sound. The flying foes are knocked to the same area, but the rubbermen's advance isn't halted. Bullshit. Kyoka states while looking at the 6 men. We need to get down there and help Momo, tell Kyoka before her chest starts glowing. An extremely long rope slides out of Momo's chest and she ties it to a rock jutting out of the mountain. She kicks the rock to make sure it's sturdy and stuck to the mountain. Who goes first? Kyoka asks. I'll go, I've always wanted to smack somebody with a baseball bat. Momo decides before sliding down the rope. It doesn't take long for the rock to break off the mountain due to the new pressure, meaning that the rope is no longer anchored to anything. Kyoka leaps for the falling rope and ends up holding both the dangling Momo and the rock. The flying villains recover from Kyoka's assault and take to the skies once again. This time they set their sights on the women. I have an idea, Kyoka thinks as she is slowly dragged over the cliff edge. Momo, move over to the part of the rope with the rock on it, I'll use the weight of the rock to lower you down. She yells. Momo reaches for the other end of the rope, but a strong gust of wind pushes it away from her reach. Nice try, but we were warned about your powers, Momo said to a woman with black dragon wings and blonde hair. You were warned, but you still underestimate them. Momo shouts before pushing off of the mountain and backflipping onto her back. She quickly ties the rope around the villain's wings arms before tightening the rope. Bet you didn't know I'm a gymnast. Now. Eat dirt. Momo pushes them back towards the mountain slope side and slams the dragon girl into the wall face first. Let go. Momo told Kyoka. Kyoka reluctantly lets go. They're crazy, this is a 20 feet slide. Momo's makeshift skateboard screams. Did I say you could talk? Momo asks before shoving the side of her face back onto the mountain and holding it there with her foot. This is how they stay for the rest of the slide down the mountain with jagged rocks jutting out of it. The villain would later swear that Momo hit most of them on purpose. Then dismount, Momo says before jumping off of the villain's back. She's kind of scary. Kyoka thinks while watching from above. The man with phoenix wings dive bombs Kyoka. As soon as he gets close, Kyoka rolls to the side and the villain gets smacked by an earphone jack. Ah, stupid kid. I'll snap your neck for that one. He growls. His wings catch fire and he starts flapping themselves as she sidesteps into the gap between flame waves. She doesn't escape unscathed though, the edges of her hair have been signed by the heat. She plugs her jacks into her boots and attacks his. Kyoka charges towards the man and punches him in the nose, putting the adult flat on his back and breaking his nose in the process. For those of you that aren't aware, flying animals tend to have very brittle, hollow bones. Kyoka unleashes another wave of balance-destroying sound and forces the rest of the flying foes to land haphazardly. She approaches the fallen foes and one thought comes to mind, let's rock. Do you think we'll make it in time? Salvation asks as they run after the villains. If only they had something to attach their webs to. Really going to be an urban hero. These powers suck when I'm pursuing villains in a place without buildings. Izuku replies. So, you're saying that all a villain needs to do in order to escape us is run into a park? Salvation comments. Probably, Izuku responds. But Kaminari, Kyoka, and Momo. Stay down. Momo shouts as she slams stomach. That was rude, I didn't even attack anyone. The most you can charge me with is trespassing and you try to collapse my digestive system. Heroes these days. He remarked. Every generation gets worse than the last, I miss the days when heroes had to wait for just cause. A man with brown hair replies. If you look closely enough, you would see the occasional gray hair mixed with the brown. Momo swings her baseball bat again, only to hit more rubber. Nice try, but our organs are rubber too. Blunt force is completely useless. They taunt her. Think Momo, how do you hurt rubber? Momo questions while dodging an elongated arm. Heat. Momo realizes before her chest glows pink. A hot pink gun pops out and she catches it with both hands. Denki. Keep shocking them. Momo shouts, ducking under another swing. That didn't work before. Denki reminds her. Their rubber bodies won't conduct electricity, but the heat from that electricity can melt the rubber, or at the very least it will reduce the range of their attacks. Momo yells. She pulls the trigger and blue electricity begins to gather at the tip of the gun barrel. Scatter. One of the villains shouts before stretching their arms towards the edge of the cliff above them. He's hoping to get outside of their range and let the electricity disperse in the air. No you don't, Momo thinks before pointing the gun at the rising villain and releasing the trigger. Two metal prongs connected to wires shoot out of the gun and digs into one of the villain's arms. That arm begins to slowly melt and the villain drops to the floor once more. This time, as a man of flesh and blood. He always did have the lowest pain tolerance. A man with black hair comments before throwing a punch towards Denki. Denki ducks and grabs onto the limb. Momo, I have an idea. Conflagration zone. Sayu knew that she was in trouble. Fire is very bad for her quirk. She can't stick to the walls because of the scorching flames that have engulfed the nearby buildings. She can already feel her toxic mucus beginning to evaporate and her tongue is drying out. The smoke filling the place is also irritating her eyes. Asui, is that you? A voice calls. Sayu turns around and sees the outline of a boy's tail. It actually makes you wonder how he puts on pants when his tail is so wide and long. She also sees a shadowy figure stalking towards him through the smoke. Bajiro, move. Sayu shouts before leaping into action. She sticks out her tongue and wraps it around Ajiro's waist and reels his previous position. Thanks to Asui, I was almost cooked. Ajiro says, getting into a fighting stance as he keeps his eyes on the shadowy figure. Those villains are too prepared for this, they send the two close combat students to a place being invaded by a flame user. Sayu comments as the shadowy figure becomes more visible. You can't stick to Waldy's appearance. He's tall and scrawny, no muscles to speak of. He has a mohawk made of blue and orange flames. His red eyes are surrounded by black. Everything below the chin is covered in a black material. Knowing their luck, it's probably fireproof too. There was supposed to be another one of you, a guy with spider powers. But I guess I can kill the two of you instead. He tells them, a manic grin spreading across his lips. His flaming mohawk whips towards Ajiro, but singes his arm and a part of his blonde hair instead of burning his chest due to Sayu's timely intervention. I just got this guy, Ajiro sighs while looking at his burning sleeve. He rips both of them off, fully exposing his muscular arms. Now that attacking him is bad, making him rip his clothing off is worse, and burning him is unforgivable. Any idea how to beat this guy? Ejiro asks, he sounds fearful. Deviate the ball of fear growing in Ejiro's chest. There's nowhere to hide and catch him off guard since every building is on fire. Quit talking and fight me. The villain screams while rushing towards them. Shoto and Toru. Why are you still on my back? Shoto asks coldly. He guessed that it was Toru due to the fact that he can't see a shadow where it should be. But this is literally the safest place in the USJ. I'm not budging. Toru explains. This confuses Shoto. Why is his back the safest place? Shoto shakes his head before forcing himself onto two legs, forcing Toru to stand as well. Then people rush out of an overturned building and surround them. Toru tightens her grip on Shoto and wraps her legs around his back. Okay, fuck the 10 of you. Your boss just ruined a nice day. I flipped Endeavor off, hugged my sister, and punched my oldest brother for eating my last complete. Shoto speeds up the outward spread, capturing all of the enemies. That was easy, Toru says before she feels something disturb the air around them. She barely has time to block the incoming fist. Shoto feels Toru get off of his back and he asks her what's happening. There's a villain standing right next to you, Toru responds. He should be able to notice him too. I look around and I don't see anyone there. Only the invisible can immediately notice the She blocks another punch and slides backwards. I had to learn this in order to find my parents at home. She throws a punch, connecting with his jaw. Shoto rubs his temples and starts sliding away. I can't see what's happening, so I'm just going to start and tear one of the red-haired villains by the shirt. Tell me about your boss or else your little friend will be frozen off. He threatens, letting his right hand hover dangerously close to a certain appendage. You don't have the balls, the villain says, spitting a glob of saliva at Shoto's face. The smug look on his face is replaced by one of agony as his body is encased in a 12-inch long eye spike. Neither do you, Shoto retorts. Alright, I'll tell you everything I know. Just unthaw my best friend. The villain screams. Fine, Shoto replies before Our boss is a guy called Tamura Shigaraki. He showed up at our hideout 3 weeks ago. He came with an offer that we couldn't refuse. Help him kill All Might. He threatened to give us a fate worse than death if we declined his offer. The villain explains in a panic. It takes more than a simple threat to gather this many villains to one spot. And All Might is a name that makes most villain. 200 million yen, the villain shouts before he falls over, completely unconscious. Okay, that was unexpected, Shoto thinks before bending down to check for a pulse. He holds his finger there for 5 minutes and the beat never changes. Good, he isn't dead. Stands up and grabs a new villain. If I find out that any of my classmates got hurt or worse because of this attack, I will spend the rest of my life putting you guys behind bars. Every time you commit a crime, I will be the one to hunt you down with an honest-to-God smile on my face, he growls. Nobody messes with his favorite associates and gets away scot-free. Toru, where you at? Shouts. This next move is going to be big. About 16 feet, another 20. Give me 5 minutes, this bad guy doesn't know when to quit. Toru responds. It turns out that this villain knows how to take a punch. Even when she hits him in the dick or throat. Okay, Shoto thinks before starting to hum his favorite song. Toru shoves the invisible man towards Shoto before sprinting in the opposite direction. I'm far away, Toru struggling to escape the ice around their legs. Sitting upon the frozen heavens whispers. He speed of a raging river rapidly and encapsulates the villains in a pillar that stretches to the USJ dome. And the frostbite is back. Shoto thinks while looking at his numb, shivering hand, this really bites. But Izuku. Izuku had managed to sneak up on the villains that passed him earlier by climbing up the mountainside instead of taking the man-made path. Now, he's trying to figure out if he should attack the vertical beast first or clear out the smaller mooks first. I'm telling you, that big guy needs to be beaten first. He'll do more damage to you than the other guys ever get a lucky shot in. I will not be Goku or Yamcha, Izuku retorts. Salvation isn't sure how to argue against that. Izuku has a very good point. Greater men have false argument. I still don't understand how you can track her too, but okay, Izuku replies. Back when they were wee tykes, Salvation would separate from Izuku and they'd play hide and seek during the short time frame they were allowed. Each game had a 3-minute limit because Salvation couldn't survive by himself. He'd start getting weaker and losing color. On Izuku's end, he felt much weaker than normal. He had to put more effort into doing things that were simple moments before their split. Salvation never lost a game. Izuku quit trying to beat him when he turned 7. Izuku leaps high into the air before shooting 2 and strings at the ground next to an enemy. Pulling himself down towards the enemy, smashing him to the dirt in the process, then jumping off. He spews hot ash, so that must mean he stores it in either his stomach or his lungs. This means I can't afford to hit him in the stomach or chest until I know where the ash is coming from. Avoiding his mouth is also a priority. Izuku thinks to himself. You're a lively bastard, tell you that smoking kills. Izuku shouts as he lands. That's what I'm hoping for, he replies. He puts the rest of the cigarette in his mouth before starting to chew it. Izuku leaps over the guy trying to hit him from behind, pushes him to the floor, and webs his arms down. Squish the spider brat. The man in the cowboy hat commands. Izuku's spider sense starts going crazy, forcing him to turn around and jump. The reason? A red-haired 300-pound giant charging towards him. As this man passes under him, Salvation attaches tendrils to his back and pulls them towards him. You know how to steer this guy? Salvation asks. I have a hypothesis. Izuku replies before shooting a web string at the side of the mountain and pulling on it. Thanks to his adhesive abilities, Deku is able to slightly change their path and, as a result, this happens. My leg. My ribs. My everything. That's right, most of the villains get trampled by their unlikely ally. The villain Izuku is steering slides to a halt. I'm going to stomp a mud hole in your chest, off of him. It takes more than silly string to stop the juggernaut. The villain yells as the ground starts cracking underneath his feet. Soon, both of his feet are free, well, not exactly free, his feet are just stuck to slabs of earth. No Salvation gasps. You've got to be shitting me. That webbing is strong enough to stop a plane full of buses, you should be immobile. Izuku screams. Puny spider boy, nothing stops the juggernaut. Juggernaut declares while rushing towards Izuku. Izuku looks behind him and gets an idea. He decides not to move. Ramming speed, Juggernaut says, as the gap between him and his pushing those legs with enough strength to cause a 5% increase in speed, and the Juggernaut careens off the mountain. That was anticlimactic. Salvation deadpans. Juggernaut hurled himself off a mountain. What? Did you expect me to get into a fight with a guy that pulled up a large chunk of rock with his feet? Izuku responds while watching the Juggernaut fall. Boy, if planning. They weren't supposed to be fighting Izuku. Can I get a name? I can't just keep calling you cowboy hat guy in my head. Izuku asks as he dodges the burning ash spewing out of the villain's mouth. Call me Ash, he replies. That's not very creative. Izuku shouts as the ash starts to burn Salvation. Tell my mother that. She insisted that I be named after the quirk I was guaranteed to inherit. Ash retorted before spitting another ball of hot ashes. Feels bad, man. I can only imagine how angry I will be if I was named after a spider species, Izuku comments on. He shoots a web through the ball of ash and carries some of it away. It attaches to Ash's arm and he gets to enjoy the feeling of being burned by his own ashes. You're evil. Ash yells in pain. He uses his gray cowboy hat to remove the web and sighs in relief. There's a faint burn mark on his arm, it's shaped like a spider web. That was my favorite hat too. He thinks. Says the guy trying to kill a bunch of teens for no reason. Salvation responds. Hey. I didn't plan on getting my hands bloodied, that's what the mooks were for. Ash explains. Izuku slams his fair enough. Then he starts spinning while spitting more of that annoying ash into the air. This ash didn't work before, why would it work now? Izuku is left to watch in horror as the ash starts to form a tornado high above them. Don't you dare. Salvation tells Izuku. A Detroit smash isn't going to help them if it breaks their one good arm. I wasn't thinking about anything, Izuku claims. I know you, Salvation replies before they start running up a wall, hoping to grab Kyoka before the ash starts dispersing through the air. But Kyoka, Denki, and Momo. Yay. Denki yells while walking in circles with his thumbs up. Kyoka looks down at the fallen villains twitching on the floor due to Denki, so becoming an idiot is the price of being overpowered. Suddenly, Kyoka is grabbed by the back of her jacket and lifted into the air before being tossed over the cliff's edge like a sack of kittens. Well, that was easier than it should have been. I'm actually quite disappointed. The attacker says while shaking her head. So many people to help. I guess this is goodbye, Mom, Dad, Izuku. I close my eyes as the ground gets closer and closer. Third pav. Kyoka's body hits the ground with a hard thud. Her face slams into the ground first, snapping her jaw into the sound of blood being gargled. Kyoka. Momo shrieks as she rushes over to blood for her to help her very much. Her mouth is full of too much blood. Momo turns Kyoka on her side in order to prevent her from drowning in her own blood. Tears begin to leak from Momo's eyes, she's completely useless. Her book doesn't tell her how to make medical supplies. I'm sorry, Kyoka. I wasn't good enough, I don't deserve to be the deputy representative, Momo whimpers. Kyoka coughs up blood, it's not your fault, Momo. She soon falls asleep. She's right, you know. Momo jerks her head to the side to see the Izuku's and Salvation's arrival. The concealed fury in his voice goes unnoticed by her. I'm the class rep of Class 1A. I'm the guy that's supposed to lead by example and keep everyone safe. He could have handled the initial assault that separated them. Now Kyoka is bleeding out because of my foolish actions. His shaking fists also go unnoticed. Meanwhile, Salvation is deliberating his next move. I can still heal Izuku, and I'm half foreign DNA now. Going by that logic, I should be able to heal Kyoka without any complications. Alright. I've made up my mind. Salvation pulls out a piece of himself before giving it a very simple order. Heal mom, then return, ASAP. This chunk of green and purple goo sinks into Kyoka's blood-filled mouth without anyone noticing. Momo, as class rep, I order you and Salvation to escort Denki and Kyoka back to the entrance of the USJ. By now, backup should be on their way here. Izuku looks up to see a girl standing upon the precipice. I have some unfinished business to take care of. Are you sure you can handle this without me? You aren't fully healed yet. Salvation asks, asking for confirmation that this is his desire. Izuku nods his head, a stern look of determination directed at the woman above them. Once the last piece of Salvation is gone, his multiple enzymes start to slowly be burnt out of Izuku's system, allowing Izuku to feel all of the pain inflicted to his body during his fights. This also leaves him naked again. Momo blushes before handing him another gym uniform to put on. Now, get moving. Izuku exclaims before leaping towards the cliff. Salvation climbs onto Kyoka's body before forming a suit around her. This one is much bulkier than before. Salvation isn't willing to put more of himself inside of Kyoka's body. This means he can't make this combat form as slim as the one Izuku uses. Izuku lands in front of the woman he saw before and notices that she isn't alone. I hope your intel told you about this guy. Boss, he isn't worth your time. Someone agrees. I can pound him by myself, another declares. Izuku subconsciously spreads one for all into his legs before stomping the ground. This kicks up dust and the entire cliff shakes violently, knocking every foe off their feet. One crack forms where his foot struck. That crack spread horizontally through the cliff. Is that all you go? That mook gets cut off by the sound of more cracking. This continues for several minutes before gravity starts doing its job, snapping the damaged precipice off the mountain. Crash. Flee. Izuku growls, sending the mook scam. You can't find good servants these days, the lone woman sighs while shaking her head. She starts walking away. This isn't her problem anymore. She was paid to deal with the sound girl, not that freak of nature. She doesn't see the web bomb stuck to her back, so she's completely helpless when the bomb explodes. This not only knocks her to the ground, but also leaves her in a bad position, as sticky fluid splatters all over her back, sticking her to the ground. Not you, you don't get to run away from this. You don't get a second chance in this life or the next. If you try to run or escape, I'll hunt you down. And if, when I catch you, I will break your legs, as much as legally justifiable. After that, I will make sure you never see the outside of a prison. Izuku starts limping in the opposite direction before crawling down the mountain. Moments after his departure, the ash starts raining down, as huge clumps. Why are you following me? Ken's over, placing his hands on his knees. He's breathing heavier than he was mere moments ago. Is it just me or is it getting hard to breathe around here? It's not just you, I'm not getting enough oxygen to balance out the oxygen I'm using up. Kirishima gasps. It feels like he's been inhaling carbon dioxide this entire time. Is this one of their quirks? But who could be doing this? Katsuki thinks as he scans the city ruins. Nothing strikes him as odd. Nothing except that one guy with vines instead of hair that's standing deathly still. Kirishima stops breathing until I say so. Katsuki commands, getting a nod and knocks the plant guy off his feet. The air begins to return to normal. Katsuki takes a breath of air, then he tells Kirishima to breathe into his face. I knew it, that fucker has an area of effect quirk that allows him to replace the air with carbon dioxide. We've probably been poisoned by now, mental maths isn't my area of expertise. So, what do we do? Kirishima asks, somewhat surprised at Bakugo's intelligence. Tactical retreat and seek medical assistance for a potentially lethal amount of CO2 inhalation. Katsuki responds before pulling Kirishima into a fireman's carry. Katsuki kicks off his shoes and socks. What are you doing? Kirishima asks as Katsuki crouches down. Self, I will save you because that's what a hero does. He moves his left leg and launches a small explosion from his foot in order to alter their flight path. The bolt of lightning sails past them. Kirishima is still awed by his current situation. Since when could you use your feet to fly? Not too long ago, I figured out that I can use the sweat produced by my feet to make explosions, and my legs deal with the recoil better than my arms do. I also figured that this would make rescuing injured civilians easier, Katsuki responds. You discovered legs. Kirishima whispers. Don't tell Izuku about this. It's supposed to be a surprise. Katsuki continued, he didn't hear what Kirishima said. Aizawa had been fending off the main assault for quite a while. It's gotten to the point that combat has gotten repetitive. He activate a quirk, wrap his scarf around the enemy, and slam him into the ground. Once the enemy is down, crash his leg into their head to knock them out. Once they're down, blink his eyes. Rinse and repeat until only the most resilient mutant quirk users are left standing. You can't cheat in a game that wasn't fair to begin with. Aizawa says, as he spin kicks another villain in the chin. Aizawa leaps back, as a massive black fist slams into his previous position. Yeah. Go get him, Nomu. We're clearing the stage and going after All Might later. Tamura shouts. Their time limit is surely about to expire soon. Level 40 heroes are bound to arrive any minute. Nomu vanishes in a burst of speed, reappearing with his fist buried into Aizawa's gut, forcing Aizawa to throw up blood as he folds over the fist. He definitely broke something. But what's up with that speed? I know I was looking at him before he moved. Aizawa thinks before being suplexed by Nomu. After slamming Aizawa, Nomu picks him up and kicks Aizawa in the face. Aizawa turns into a black missile with one destination. The USJ ceiling. Nomu leaps after him and wraps him in a bone-crushing hug. As they near the ceiling, Nomu flips them so that their heads are facing the ground and he cut off by a green and purple foot to the stomach. Salvation had arrived. Salvation pushes off from Tamura, rocketing towards Aizawa and Nomu. Not today, bird brain. Efficiently, the spinning stops completely. Now Salvation is able to attach a tendril to the web cocoon and the ceiling. Salvation starts to reel the cocoon towards him before he starts to hear a voice whisper in his head. Please me. Please kill me. Salvation flinches as the voice starts screaming into his brain. Salvation can't understand why anyone would choose to die. Death is never the answer to the problem, Izuku said so. Salvation continues to reel his teacher to safety, ignoring the fact that it feels like his brain is his webbing. Let go of Aizawa. Salvation yells as he starts prying Nomu's arms away from Aizawa. He digs two tendrils into Nomu's skin and slams them through bone with an audible crack. Nomu doesn't flinch or scream at this unwelcome intrusion though, his face remains blank as he tries to retighten his grip into a spine-shattering hug. After all, the only thing he's capable of is following orders. You won't succeed, Salvation declares while making sure that he isn't putting any stress on the body sleeping within him. The bleeding has stopped but are able to transfer his brain and face to a spot right next to Nomu and bypass Aizawa. Salvation unleashes a dual sonic scream at point-blank range. Despite coming from the same source, both sounds are distinctly different. One sounds more masculine, while the other is clearly at a pitch only a female can achieve without tearing their vocal cords or genitals to shreds. This cutscene's cry. Skin separates from flesh. Sinew is torn from bone. Ligament is free to fall into the spider web of tendrils that Salvation had been creating beneath them. Salvation drops into the web with Aizawa before he slams Nomu to the ground with his tendrils. You aren't from Izuku, Aizawa. Izuku doesn't fight like that and his webs don't behave like that. I'm Salvation, I reside within Izuku. You can call me the ace up his sleeve, Salvation responds. Where is he? Somewhere between the mountains and the plaza. Kyoka got injured and we had to make an emergency exit, Salvation answers before looking down at Nomu's body. What the hell? Nomu's arms are back. I thought his quirk was super strength. Aizawa shouts at the cackling Tamura. That's not his only quirk. Round 2, fleshlights. Tamura is giddy at this point. Nomu is about to make a rampaging Jinchuriki from Naruto look like a toddler throwing a tantrum. Leaping from the crater, Nomu tears through Salvation's web with ease. The duo are forced to return to the ground. Shit. Salvation yells. I can't afford to get into a fist fight while Kyoka is still in here, but at the same time, I can't fight without a host to act as my skeleton. Then retreat and get my student to safety. I'll stall until support from the UA arrives. Aizawa commands. Time for a game of death tag. Salvation flees to the USJ door. Nomu blitzes Aizawa and picks him up by the head, his fingers shattering Eraserhead's iconic goggles and sending the shards into his eyes. Blood spurts out as the shards dig further and pierce the area behind the eyeball. Aizawa refuses to give them the satisfaction of hearing him scream. Nomu throws Aizawa into the ground, creating a crater 6 feet deep. Picking Aizawa up by the leg, Nomu begins repeatedly slamming him into the dirt. Before anybody can do anything else, the door of the USJ bursts open and a wave of smoke follows after it. You picked the wrong day to invade this school. A hero growls while walking through the smoke. All of his facial hair is on fire. His shoes are as well. Why? Because we are here. The backup in the form of the number 2 hero. Endeavor. Endeavor had been in the principal's office talking with Nezu and All Might when Iida arrived. They were trying to figure out who would host the high school reunion party for their graduating class. Endeavor might not look like it, but he sure knows how the Detroit smash that pushes Nomu away from Izawa's fallen form. Brand Fireball. Endeavor whispers with the opposite of tranquil fury. How dare these villains invade his alma mater? He teaches them to fear his flames. The ball of red and orange flame slams into Nomu, knocking him further back. The burn on his chest heals slowly. Shit, Tamura thinks to himself. They hadn't expected Endeavor's presence at UA as well. They could handle All Might by himself. Nomu was designed to complete that task. But the combined might and fury of the top 2 heroes is a combination that every criminal would fear. Burned to ashes. Endeavor yells as he throws a javelin of flames through Mom's stomach. Now it's your turn. Endeavor turns to look at Tamura, leaving him open to an uppercut from Nomu. He notices that the gaping hole is slowly sealing itself shut. Regeneration, that's not a problem. Endeavor smirks before igniting his hands in fireballs that are a mix of blue and black flames. They will regret angering the Master of Hell. Vanishing in a burst of speed with Izawa in tow, he lands next to Salvation and the students that avoided being warped. Watch over him, All Might commands before he rushes on Ijiri. He grabs the Mist Man and chucks him into the central plaza. How did you know? Kurogiri grunts as his metal plates hit the ground. Shut up. All Might roars as he punches the air. The wind turns into a tornado that quickly sucks the Mist Man into it. All Might. That was for Iida. He leans back and kicks Tamura into the air. This is for 1A. He springs into the air, leaving a crater behind. And this is for Izawa. His axe kicks Tamura. The recipient of that kick crashes into the ground, creating an even deeper crater and kicking up a column of dust. I'm definitely going to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Izuku thinks as he continues blindly climbing down the mountain. His right arm is completely free of Salvation's enzymes. Now he is free to feel all of the pain One for All has inflicted on it. All of it. This is how Izuku found himself crawling down a mountain without the use of his dominant hand. There's blood dripping out of his middle finger and the skin on that hand has completely blackened. The collapsed precipice kicked up tons of eye-irritating dust, so Izuku isn't able to actually see where he's going. He's relying on his spider sense to tell him if he's about to grab something that can't support his weight. That crack in the mountain stretched further than Izuku thought it would. Now the entire mountainside is unstable, chunks of the mountain are being randomly dislodged from it. Eventually, Izuku finds his way back to the ground and stops defying gravity. He's outside of the smoke cloud now, so his ability to see should be returning to him any minute now. Before this can occur, Izuku is grabbed from behind by 2 hands. You can't stop the Juggernaut. The villain yells before slamming Izuku. He really needed it. With a sickening snap, Izuku folds over the Juggernaut's giant knee. Izuku's scream of pain is music to the Juggernaut's ears. I broke the spider. His laughter is Izuku uses his arm strength to force himself out of the dent. Every movement sends a new spike of pain through his body. Somehow he managed to force himself into a sitting position. I will win this fight. Izuku mutters as he grabs a nearby rock with his left hand. Izuku only has one shot at this. He needs to hit a spot on the human body that disables a threat of strike instead of pointy. Izuku isn't worried about killing the villain with a blunt object. He lowers his output to avoid crushing the rock in his grip. Launching the rock like a missile, Izuku's own onto his back. The unstoppable Juggernaut crumbles to the ground. Then the pain kicks in again, and Izuku lets out a heart-wrenching scream as his left arm dislocates from his shoulder. This screaming continued for quite a while, drawing the attention of 2 students that were heading towards the central plaza. Do you hear that? Asos, as he slides on a sheet of ice. The screaming or the collapsing mountain? Toru asks from her position on Shoto's back. That scream sounds like Izuku, doesn't it? Shoto responds. It's starting to give him flashbacks to when Endeavor dislocated his shoulder during one of their training sessions. But Aizu's doesn't work if you're invisible, Shoto thinks. He shakes this thought away before replying, he's strong, yes, but strong doesn't mean invincible. We can still be beaten if our opponent knows what they're doing or our guard drops for a single instant. Toru replied before letting out a scream of her own. The duo had just arrived at Izuku's location. Shoto drops Toru on her feet and rushes over to Izuku. Midoriya, can you stand, can you fight? Shoto asks. Izuku stifles another scream and starts to respond. I can't feel my legs anymore and my arms are on their last legs. Toru applies pressure to Izuku's arm, eliciting a brief cry of pain and puts it over his shoulder. If your legs don't work, I'll just carry you to recovery, girl. Find Salvation, that's the quicker option. He'll be able to minimize the damage. Maybe he'll be able to fix my spine. He's good with shattered bones. Izuku whispers as Shoto gets him in a vertical position. Where is he? I thought the two of you were inseparable, Toru asks. He's at the gate healing Kyoka. She was losing a lot of blood last time I saw her. Izuku answers as Shoto drags him towards the plaza. Blood lands on him. The trio of students is mostly silent as they search for salvation. The only sounds being created are the sounds of feet hitting dirt, feet hitting concrete, and feet being dragged across both. Let's not forget the occasional whimper whenever Shoto does something that makes Izuku glare fixed at the black and blue flames being tossed into the air. Shoto knows that fire. Endeavor Shoto snarls, gaining Toru's attention in the process. She doesn't say anything. Now isn't the time. I'll ask him about this later. Toru thinks as Shoto's murderous expression shifts back into an aloof expression. Toru spots a green creature standing stairs. Grab his legs, I'm not dragging him up 30 steps. They manage to get him up the steps relatively quickly, but Toru is out of breath by the time they finish. I should really help. I leave you alone for 6 minutes and you get your ass kicked by a mook. You didn't even make it to the boss battle. It was the guy I told you to take out first, wasn't it? Salvation sighs before laying Izuku down, then laying down next to him. Salvation leaps off of Kyoka's unconscious body and returns to the body he has inhabited for 11 years. He broke your spine. Salvation yells. He'll have to deal with that first before it accidentally stabs something vital for Izuku's continued existence. Recovery girl can heal the arms if he isn't done by the time she arrives. Eku, what happened to you? Echako rushes over towards her downed friend. Tears are beginning to leak from her eyes. I fell down some stairs, Izuku Sato responds, playing along. Yeah, it was a juggernaut, Izuku retorts while trying to copy the juggernaut's voice. Echako starts laughing uncontrollably and crying at the same time. I don't get it, Shoto thinks. Meanwhile, Endeavor is in the middle of burning every last Nomu cell to the point of carbonation. Go to hell. He shouts from the sky above flames. These flames hit the ground and erupt into a pillar of flame that engulfs the Nomu, and M's heat having evaporated away all the water in the fountain and leaving nothing but charred black soil behind. We're losing. Tamura thinks as he pulls himself out of the crater All Might kicked him into. All Might punches Tamura in the face, knocking out a couple teeth and knocking Tamura out. By now Kurogiri's tornado has stopped, giving him the ability to see what happened during his absence. I believe it's time I make my hasty retreat. Kurogiri vanishes into his for recovery girl to treat the wounded. All Might had left to retrieve all of the missing students. He found them all except for 2. The Kugo's and Kirishima's unconscious bodies fell out of the sky while All Might was away. Endeavor had stomped up the steps, grabbed Shoto by the collar, and dragged him off somewhere to have a private conversation. While all of this was happening, Salvation and Recovery Girl were busy doing damage control, slowly trying to reattach the 2 pieces of Izuku's spine and fix his arms. Recovery Girl's office. Izuku wakes up next to an occupied hospital bed. I'm in a wheelchair. My legs are completely numb, I can't feel them anymore. He tries to move them, but his body won't respond. Izuku starts to panic, he can't be a hero without legs. Before you start freaking out about your legs, let me explain. It's not as bad as you think, Salvation interrupts. You really owe her a thank you. If it was up to me alone, you'd never be able to walk by yourself. But thanks to me, Recovery Girl, and her quirk, you'll regain the full use of your legs eventually. You'll need a lot more healing sessions, more than you could ever afford. But fortunately she's feeling generous enough to work for free. Oh, where's Kyoka? I'm right here, she groans as she pushes the cover off of her face. Are you okay? Izuku asks as he looks at the band asking if she's okay. I'm fine. That's good, I'm glad, Izuku smiles. Since neither one of us are going anywhere for a minute, I might as well tell you a story about how I learned to web swing. Izuku is attempting to distract her from the fact that he's bound to a chair for the foreseeable future. Sounds interesting, let's hear it. She sighs, it's better than silence. It happened when I was 8 years old. Flashback. I had just finished climbing to the top. How this story would end if I didn't have bad spider powers. I shot my web at a nearby tree branch, hoping to slow my descent. It did, and at the same time, it didn't. As soon as my web string touched a branch, I was forced to move in an arc of backwards and forwards meant as that I grabbed a bird and pulled both of us to the ground. Flashback end. Kyoka starts laughing, you and the birds just don't get along at all, do you? I'm friends with Fumikage, I think. Izuku and Kyoka had been alone in the Recovery Girl's office for an hour now. Izuku started to get fidgety, he can't roll to the bathroom or scratch the itch under his in one attempt. So for the next day and a half, his arms are stuck in the itchy bandages and a quirk-proof sling, thanks to the one for all backlash. His fidgeting is put to an end by Kyoka's pillow smacking his face. Stop that, you're making me nervous. Unlike you, I can't get up to go to the restroom. He retorts I need somebody to roll me down to the bathroom and neither I nor Salvation know the way to the restroom. This school is a giant maze. Just use the maps on the walls. Kyoka sighs. We're afflicted with it, Izuku replies, we couldn't read a map to save our lives. I can do science, English, math and quirks, but maps are outside of my skill set. Luckily GPS makes map reading unnecessary. Fine, I'll take you to the bathroom. Kyoka moves her legs to the side of the bed, preparing to stand up. You can't. I need someone to help me get on and off the toilet, wiping isn't possible either. Salvation refuses to come into bathrooms with me. Pee and poop scares him. Poop looks and smells terrible. Plus, it gets stuck to my body. Kyoka starts to blush, it doesn't matter. You and Salvation saved my life today, helping you use the toilet is the least I can do. Izuku is reluctant to agree. It's not shyness about her seeing his package that has him hesitating, he doesn't care that she'll see more of him than usual, it's pride. Letting his friends see his genitals is one thing, letting them help him wipe his ass is another thing entirely. Izuku is about to decline, but gets interrupted by Salvation. Quit being stubborn. You need to use the bathroom and she's willing to help you. Put aside your pride and let her carry your reckless butt to the toilet. Izuku tries to force his arms out of their slings, you can't expect me to toss away the only thing I have right now. My ability to defend myself has been taken for who knows how long. My ability to walk on my own has. Now, you're telling me to let my pride be stripped away too. Once that goes away, what, the kid who couldn't do anything and nobody but his mom cared about? No, I'll be less than a Deku, I'll be a teen that can't do anything, not even help himself. Kyoka is stunned. She had no idea that Izuku felt that way. He's been cracking jokes for the past hour, but on the inside he's been completely different. He has been trying to lift her spirits, but at the same time his spirit has been breaking apart at the seams. The thought that having his body broken would create mental scars that run just as deep as the physical scars had never crossed her mind. She stands up and pulls Izuku into a hug, you'll have me. I won't leave, no matter what. Thankfully, Izuku replies, it looks like he's about to cry. Let's find that restroom. Tables were flipped over, glass littered the floor, and papers were flying through the air in a circle, trapping them in a paper storm. It was hell on earth. No peace or quiet, the room is full of bloodlust and screaming. No hope of salvation. It fled as soon as this monster entered the room. The only thing that remains is pure unadulterated calamity. It was as if the horsemen of the apocalypse descended upon the earth and inflicted their wrath as conquest and war devastated everything in sight. While at the same time Pandora's box was opened and view. But let's see how it started. While his successor is being wheeled to a bathroom by his friend, All Might is in Principal Nexus' office, waiting for Inko Midoriya to arrive. He had no idea what was in store as soon as the door burst open and a furious Inko stomped in moments later. Her hair is wiping around wildly, as if being tossed around by a wind only she could. Starts cowering under a coffee mug. You promised me. Inko screams before Nezu's favorite teacup is sent flying into a wall, shards of ceramic peppering the floor due to maternal fury. You said this was a safe place for Izuku. She shouts as All Might gets shoved into the princess. Confetti quickly begins to circle through the air and create mini tornadoes. Inko, it wasn't our fault. All Might gasps while clutching his back. Like hell it isn't. This is the school that trains future heroes, the next generation of society, yet you guys never thought to make it teleportation proof. What happens if a villain gets the bright idea to warp in, grab 2 students, then warp out? You have Enji's son here too, for Buddha's sake, there's bound to be people that want him dead or worse. Inko yells before Nexus' hiding place gets shattered. The glass windows also explode inwards, littering the floor with glass. Nezu whimpers as his table being rolled to the bathroom by a speed-walking Kyoka. What's wrong? She asks as she slides them to a stop. Mom is super nettled. Izuku responded with a vacant look in his eyes. His spider sense always warns him whenever his mom starts throwing around psychic attacks. He calms down before lethal objects start flying. One day Izuku was unwillingly getting tossed into the air repeatedly in the park by the tongue of a 3rd grader with a toad quirk, and Inko pulled up in. The kid found herself buried under Al's sand from the sandbox. Her parents, well, let's just say that Izuku will never look at the metal bars on a swing set the same way ever again. Itsuki was in a much better condition than most of his classmates that were teleported, and that's saying a lot. Explosion recoil. Easy work for recovery girl to heal. Sai's tongue had been scorched, and it would take a while to heal. And even then, tasting food might be a little difficult. It collapsed, and he was sent to a real hospital for help. Luneta was fine. He hid like a coward until All Might found him. Koji Koda is also fine thanks to Fumikage and Dark Shadow being strong as fuck in the darkness. Iida will live, but they weren't able to find his missing hand to reattach it. His hand is under the collapsed mountain. Toru is also fine, she just has a couple invisible bruises. Kirishima just had his poison status cured. Thankfully he was unconscious, so the whole oxygen pumping process was easy. Shoto hasn't been seen ever since Endeavor pulled him away at the USJ. Speaking of them, you're a fool, Endeavor snarls, as soon as they get home, you refuse to accept your destiny. You will use your flames and surpass All Might. I don't believe in destiny, and I don't need the curse you gave me. What will you do when you find someone who regenerates faster than your ice can batter and slice them? Just find a way to freeze them at a level that prevents the cells from replicating. Answers before slamming the door. Just in time too, as the door is impacted by a small ball of flame moments later. Looks down at his shaking right hand, it still stings from the coldness of his ice, frostbite, and hypothermia. He almost doesn't hear the sound of his door opening. He tenses up, preparing to unleash his ice if his father walks through that door right now. Shoto, are you okay? He deactivated his quirk as soon as he heard the soft voice of his sister. I'm fine, Fayumi, just a little angry and cold. Sighs, he can't stay mad around her. She's too kind for him to direct his fury at. He tries to hide the palm of his hand. She interlocks their fingers before placing her left hand on the back of his right hand. A righty crit, she inherited ice and flames. Endeavor wasn't home to see her quirk's first activation, so her mother told her to hide her rose flames from her dad as soon as her quirk activated. Their mom knew that Fayumi wouldn't be allowed to pursue her teaching dream if Endeavor knew she had inherited both of their quirks like he wanted. The natural crimson streaks in her white hair were just written off as a weird mutation. The combination of hot and cold safely raises the temperature of Shoto's hand and gets rid of the stinging sensation on his palm. Thanks, Shoto said before Fayumi let go of his hand and cut off her flame. Anytime, baby bro. So how was your day, minus Endeavor being an ass? Fayumi pulls Shoto into a hug. Not good, but far from the worst day of my life. That award goes to the day I found out mom hates me. Replies. Fayumi hugs him tighter, mom doesn't hate you. She never could. Shoto snorts, explaining that to the burn on my face. Amik. Rejected cluck in the world, but blessed with the most powerful quirk in return. Now you're probably wondering. What quirk could possibly be considered the most powerful? Well, that's an easy one. Negation. He can negate any power with his right hand. It doesn't matter what it is, if it is the result of a quirk, he can negate it with a simple touch. It also grants him immunity to any quirk that would affect his entire body. This means that teleportation, time, and gravity quirks are completely ineffective. Whenever he negates the quirk, a strange sound is made. It sounds a sports festival. I have to finish this in one move, Shoto thinks, as he prepares to unleash another giant wave of ice as soon as the match starts. Height present, Mick shouts. The arena is quickly flooded by ice, but Izuku isn't afraid. He pulls his fist back and prepares to punch the avalanche of ice heading his way. You have to try harder than Shoto. Izuku yells as his fist meets ice, stopping the ice in his path from advancing. Nani? Gasps, he didn't think Izuku's quirk had the power to affect an area this large. The ice shatters, allowing Shoto to see that Izuku wasn't even hurt by the ice he punched. Izuku starts to chuckle, which quickly turns into a maniacal laugh. You fool. Did you really think you could defeat the imaginary breaker with a simple ice attack? You don't understand how my power works, but I understand yours. I understand that without your flames will crush you. Izuku screams as he charges towards Shoto. He tries to make an ice shield to defend himself, but the imagined breaker just punches through it and Izuku scores a direct hit on Shoto's nose, breaking it with an audible crunch. This is followed by a knee strike to the stomach, bringing Izuku back to the recovery girl's office when they start to smell something foul. Izuku immediately makes Kyoka suggests as she stops next to the main infirmary's entrance. Izuku slowly and silently nods in agreement with Kyoka. He has something to tell them, easier to say it now instead of tracking everyone down individually. Eat your fucking soup is the first thing Kyoka and Izuku hear as they open the door to the main infirmary. Izuku looks slightly to the left and sees Katsuki trying to shove a spoonful of a strange white slop down Kirishima's throat. He wants to get the attention of all his classmates. Izuku's awake. Achako announces while dashing away from Iida's bedside. Iida quickly hobbles after her. Look at that, Izuku's here, Kirishima says to Katsuki. This immediately halts Katsuki's spoon. Kirishima pulls himself out of bed and the two of them start walking towards Izuku. This process continues until all of Class 1A, minus Shoto, Yuga, and Mineta. What happened to you? Fumikage asks with barely hidden sadness. Who did this to you? Katsuki growls, seconds away from blasting something. Izuku sighs before telling the class about his encounter with the Juggernaut. As he tells his tale, an aura of sadness spreads throughout the room, giving it a dark and gloomy atmosphere. This guy sounds like serious trouble. I hope I never have to fight that beast, Kaminari thinks, as a shiver creeps up his spine. He knows that he would end up in a worse position than Izuku is in. Izuku has a stronger spirit than I initially suspected. He experienced this conflict, yet his spirit is burning brighter than ever before. Would the same be true for me? Fumikage ponders as Izuku finishes the recap. Shoji speaks up. So what happens now? The answer to that is obvious, isn't it? We just get stronger and kick their asses, Kirishima responds while hardening his arms. Izuku shakes his head and lets out a sigh. You're correct, but I have something to tell all of you first. I need to apologize for my failures. I wasn't good enough to stop them from separating us. Tears start streaming down his face. Ioka wraps her arms around Izuku and pulls him into a hug. This isn't your fault. The villains were prepared for us while tilting her head. I could have blown the first wave of mist away, it would have given us time to mount a defense. I could have tied all of us together with webbing. I could have broken down the door with my strength and held him off while you guys escaped. Izuku rambles while looking down at his legs. He's surprised when he feels another person hug him. And another. And another. And another. And another. Soon enough it becomes a giant dog pile in the middle of the infirmary. Even Katsuki reluctantly joined the dog pile after the 13th hug happened. Fumikage was the 12th hug. You guys are the best, Izuku thinks, as the tears stop falling. Under the dog pile of his peers, Izuku silently swears to get stronger for them, and the first step towards this goal is doing something about One for All, and getting answers about a question that's been gnawing at the back of his head for a couple weeks. After the dog pile ended, Izuku and Kyoka head back to the recovery girl's office. They arrive just in time for All Might to crash, and Kyoka tries to stifle a giggle. Izuku knows that this will be used against him eventually, and Kyoka knows that she'll use it against Izuku soon. I think she's looking for you, Kyoka whispers into Izuku's ear. Ugh, I hate when she gets like this. I can't even get a bruise without her going berserk. Izuku groans. He appreciates the support, but throwing teachers through walls is where a line needs to be drawn. Any clever response that Kyoka was going to make is cut out by a dark, malevolent aura exploding out of the room. Inko Midoriya stalks through the broken doorway with her hair whipping wildly through the air like she's standing in the middle of a tornado. Floating behind her are the following items. A coffee mug, a foldable metal chair, and a wooden table leg. Mom, put the phoenix back in the cage. Izuku shouts. His words smother the malevolent aura, and all of Inko's ammo drops to the floor. My little tarantula. She exclaims while weeping. Izuku is pulled out of his chair and dragged towards Inko and gets shaken and spun around by his distraught mother. From the corner of his eye, Izuku can't see Kyoka trying to fight off the grin tugging at her lips. I love you too, Mom, but I really need to talk to All Might right now. Izuku struggles to speak while being suffocated with his mother's love. It took 15 minutes for Inko to let go of her son. And when he tried to leave her side and enter Recovery Girl's office with All Might in tow, she tried to follow. It took 10 minutes for Izuku to convince her to let him do this alone. She should be tormenting Kyoka until he leaves the room again. Finally, Izuku whispers after hearing the soft click of the door. Now it's ready. Questions for another day, time to get straight down to the heart of the issue. He twists his neck towards All Might. How does One for All actually work? You mentioned that it stockpiles power from one user and passes it down to the next, but what does that entail? Power is a broad term. Will it pass along my quirk or just the physical strength I have when I pass it down? This is important because my physical strength will constantly fluctuate based on my body. And depending on what One for All passes on, my successor and everyone after them could have an impossible test with a recoil. Izuku states, causing Nezu's eyes to widen in realization. What do you mean? All Might asks. My quirk is a mutant quirk that gives the user the proportional strength of a spider and enhanced durability to make sure that the super strength doesn't break their body. These are just theories, but if One for All doesn't integrate enhanced durability but stores Izuku's proportional strength, it could mutate into A. If both are integrated into One for All, it can turn into B. It puts a cap on the amount of One for All's power the user will be able to draw out at a time based on their body's physical limits. This means that you can give it to anyone without blowing off their limbs. A. It gives the One for All strength a boost in strength proportional to the people that acquire it in the future. If theory A or C is true, the opposite of B is true, and you can't give it to anybody without it being almost definitely lethal. Theory C is that it keeps absorbing my rapidly increasing power and adding it to One for All's reservoir of power until life flies, eliciting a sigh and frown from Recovery Girl. Well, I have no answers, just more questions. Izuku thinks to himself before asking All Might if he can train him after his arms heal. He'll have to depend on Salvation's help in order to stand up until his healing set. You've had this power for months, but have made almost no progress under my tutelage. One for all is still a hazard to your health. I'll have to call the man who trained me and ask for help. All Might shudders at the memory of his training. You don't mean him, do you? Recovery Girl shudders. She has her own bad memories about this guy. Yes, I have to call Gran Torino. 2 days off. UA has shut down due to dangerous gas leaks. The truth is that they're busy installing those anti-teleportation devices. They told the press that the injuries were due to an odorless combustible gas igniting in the conflagration zone during the rescue training. This explosion has left several students temporarily incapacitated. The League of Villains weren't mentioned, the entire attack has been swept under the rug. Some people believed the story. Why would a hero school lie to us? Others are still skeptical about it, despite having no good answer to the opposing side's question. Leaving a handicapped Izuku with nothing to do but lay his phone because his fingers are covered by the cast. You could play with your spider, Salvation suggests, while pointing tendrils at the numerous see-through containers that line 2 bedroom walls. There's tarantulas, golden silk orb weavers, and a lot of venomous spiders that a teen shouldn't have access to. Black widows shouldn't be owned by anyone. They're there for observation purposes, not playing with. Izuku replies. Those are the exact same thing, and you know it. You observe them by putting a mini fan in and watching them float away on webs. Salvation counters. That's research, I'm trying to figure out how they do it and what affects it. Izuku retorts. You have a phone and 3 laptops. You could figure all this out on the internet, Salvation said before the door is gently slammed open. You have guests. Inko announces. After Izuku agrees to meet them, Salvation bonds to Izuku's spine. He won't use that blasted wheelchair unless he absolutely has to. It's insulting and demeaning. Easily thwarted by any and every staircase. Salvation can't do this forever though, it takes a lot of energy and he still has to save enough energy for him to heal Izuku's spine. Most of his friends. Itsuki Bakugo, Kyoka Jiro, Denki Kaminari, he never told anyone except Kyoka, Achako, and Kitsuki where he lives. It's only fair that Kyoka and Achako know where he lives, he saw both of their living quarters. Achako probably brought him along. And he can't help but notice how close together Denki and Kyoka are sitting. How's it hanging? Denki asks, breaking the silence in the process. Izuku thinks about making a blatantly dirty joke, but decides against it when he remembers that Kyoka is here too. I'm fine, I've been bored without my hands, but I'm fine, Izuku answers. This answer makes Denki laugh and Kitsuki snorts. Tenya takes a minute to catch on and he tries to bury the laughter that is trying to escape. This ultimately fails once Achako starts laughing hysterically. Childish teens things from the kitchen, but if you look closely enough you could see the beginnings of a smile on her face. This is how Izuku spent the rest of his day. Joking with friends and Tenya. Finally, Izuku thought as he flexed his arms. His arms have been healed back to 100% by the combined efforts of recovery. He flexed his hand, making sure there wasn't any lingering pain. There are a couple scars on his body, should be back to 100% before the sports festival, Recovery Girl informs Izuku. This makes Izuku happy, for a minute he thought that he'd have to win the festival with webs and wheelchair combos. You fucking better be healed by then, Kitsuki thinks. Winning the sports festival will be bittersweet if he beats a cripple that can't use his full power. Izuku yawns into his right hand. Alright, sleep first, training later. But once Izuku wakes up, he's putting his nose to the grindstone and achieving the next level of power. Class resumed the next day, leaving the students of Class 1 confused about who would teach today. There is no way that Aizawa. The entire class let out a gasp when that door swung open and Aizawa entered the class with his head and arms wrapped tightly in bandages. Are you supposed to be out of the hospital? Toru asks because he looks like a walking mummy. An injury such as this won't stop me from teaching. As long as he can still talk, Aizawa can't teach. Damaged eyes and broken arms won't stop him. Listen up. The fight is far from over. 2 weeks from now, the UA's sports festival will begin. And Aleph, you will participate in it. Aizawa's monotone voice does nothing to dampen the students' excitement. But some of them are still skeptical. Kyoka is their voice. Is it really alright to have the festival after the villain attack? My student body don't know about the villains, so we have no real way to justify cancelling one of our most important events. We just give the skeptical reporters more ammo. Aizawa retorts. When no more objections are raised, Aizawa starts talking again. Due to the festival being All of your core classes will be moved to the beginning of the day, allowing you to spend the afternoon training at our facilities and getting training advice from your teachers. I expect that all of you will use this time to get stronger. Then again, you're teenagers, you'll probably spend this time goofing off and socializing. Izuku looks at Izawa, an idea forming in his mind. His web served the same purpose as Izawa's capture scarf. Maybe he can give him ideas about how to better utilize them in a variety of combat situations. He's been depending on brute force ever since he got the strength from One for All. Now that he has camouflage abilities, he has to learn stealth too. It's time to become a real spider. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. You have to create your hero names today. This festival isn't just how your usefulness becomes known. It's also a chance for your names to become known. If people like it, it sticks. But if they hear any. The door bursts open before Izawa can finish speaking. The only hero to be given an 18+ rating saunters into the room with a grin on her face. This is going to be a long hour. Izuku groans while resting his head on the back of his wheelchair. A very noticeable blush is on his cheeks. Before long, it's Izuku's turn to present his name. He rolls up to the front of the class. He still isn't completely sure about the rest of his name. He wants it to represent who he wants to be as a hero. Izuku starts talking. I've been thinking about this for a long time and I've narrowed it down to 2 options. He turns the white. That's a spectacular name. Midnight chimes in. That funny you should mention that word. I was torn between this and calling myself the spectacular hero. Izuku responds. He eventually settled on the first choice because he wants to be that type of hero. He can't help but admire the unpopular he becomes. He'll never forget about the little guy. Spider-Man returns to his desk and spends the rest of the class talking to Earphone Jack and Tsukiyomi. Itsuki opened the door. The dark bags under his purple eyes make him look like he hasn't slept in years. Against the Hero Corps students. I'm a general education student who dreams of being a hero. That dream was stolen from me by people with flashy heroic quirks. People like you. I did tell enough during the sports festival. One of you will be replaced by me. He replies. This catches the attention of Class 1A. Salvation's mask forms over Izuku's face, as Sam may be skewed towards combat quirks, but that doesn't matter. Every Gen Ed student had the potential to be in the hero course right now. If you don't believe me, a guy with a flashy quirk, allow me to point you towards 2 people in one with quirks that weren't suited for the exam at all. Toru is stolen because another participant didn't see her fighting it. Yet somehow, she managed to disable enough to enroll. There's no chance that she got rescue points, since nobody would notice her and all. The guy hiding behind the guy with a bird head, his name is Anima, his quirk doesn't affect robots at all. It only controls animals, and we know he either can't or won't control humans. So necessary to pass the exam and enter our course. So what's your excuse? DCH, go to hell, the boy mutters before storming off. I didn't even have to point out the copycat guy in 1B, he had to learn how to use other people's quirks on the fly. Salvation states with a bored tone. Don't you think you were a little harsh? Koji Koda says with sign language. We don't, Izuku responds as he sits down in his wheelchair. This surprises Koda, he didn't know that Izuku understood sign language. Omix. Rejected quirks 4. Neck grows gills and his skin becomes scaly like a fish. This is the power of evolution, but the funny thing is it's defective. That's right, it's an unstable quirk that Izuku can't connive. What happened instead is that his hand turned intangible, making Izuku stab through the table cold air that instantly froze the nitroglycerin on his palms. When he fell out of a tree, he teleported onto the dirt, completely unharmed, just slightly confused about what happened. This is fanfic, link is in the description, see you next time, till then sayonara.